Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Villanova Basketball Report here on BLS. Bob Long, Tom Trainer, Kevin Long. Well, it was an unfortunate week for Villanova in that they, after coming off a huge win against Xavier, passing an easy midweek test against DePaul, seemingly had at least the opportunity in front of them to win out and win the Big East regular season title for each of the years since the Big East realigned to continue that streak. However, in steps the Blue Jays of Creighton, a big win on the road in Omaha. Very tremendous atmosphere in that building and a tremendous team. Really, a great effort by the guards, Kyrie Thomas, Marcus Foster. A phenomenal game in which they came out and played really hard and in many ways outplayed Villanova and deserved an overtime victory. But with all that said, a huge story in college basketball, which goes beyond that game in Omaha, Nebraska. The FBI probe that stemmed from the ASM records of Andy Miller and Christian Dawkins, who was related with Miller in the business dealings, had his records and had his phone conversations wiretapped. And, well, what came out of that? A lot. That folks like Kevin Knox over at Kentucky, there were issues with his eligibility. Obviously, this all started with Brian Bowen, who was going to enroll at the University of Louisville. This was back in the summer. But the big story was Sean Miller and DeAndre Ayton, the head coach and the center, respectively, of the Arizona Wildcats. And the fact that there were conversations between Christian Dawkins directly and Sean Miller discussing $100,000 payment to presumably DeAndre Ayton or more likely someone in his immediate circle. Whether DeAndre Ayton knew about that is still undetermined. Now, Sean Miller, guys, has said that he will be vindicated, and Mark Schlaball, who by all reports leading into this has done excellent reporting, well, now all of a sudden walking back some of the things that came out just this past weekend, in that initially it was discussed as the spring of 2017 that this conversation happened. However, the wiretap specifically says that only between June and September of 2016 were these conversations actually tapped into. DeAndre Ayton also committed to Arizona in September of 2016, so why this happening in the spring of 2017 is still a mystery and something that now is starting to unravel a little bit. I think we'll learn more and more about it. But that article has now been abridged, not only saying spring 16 instead of spring 17, now just generally the year 2016 without any additional clarity. So, it's a lot to take in, guys, but what were your thoughts and what are your thoughts now as Sean Miller and his team of lawyers strongly believe they have a case now?
So I think the telling sign here is that Sean Miller didn't coach in that game against Oregon this weekend. I think that's a telling sign as to whether he is in the wrong here or, other coaches on his staff will know about this situation, and I'm sure they were all consulted when they talked about whether or not Sean Miller should coach this game or not. So I think that's a telling sign for him and potentially a career-ending scenario here for him, for his coaching career. Now, the other thing is that DeAndre Ayton played. I mean, I don't understand what the logic was with Arizona there, and then also Miles Bridges with Michigan State played. So, I'm not sure if it's the mindset of, well, if we're going to be eliminated, if we're going to have all of our wins taken away, then we're not going to make the NCAA tournament anyways, and it doesn't really matter. So you might as well play these guys. But then, why sit Sean Miller in all this? So there's a lot of question marks around that. I really don't understand why not let Sean Miller coach and let Ayton play. So that was pretty confusing for me. But for Sean Miller, a coach of his caliber, to be held out of a game like that, I think it's a telling sign that, he may be done forever in college basketball.
I think Miller is definitely done. I think you're exactly right, Kev. But for me, this is bigger picture. I think this is a serious issue for the NCAA, an issue that they can't run from any longer. And I think something's going to be done about it. I mean, you've had the biggest stars in basketball, LeBron James most recently speaking out about it, with some pretty, I mean, not novel ideas, but ideas that I think do have some weight and I think will be translated into concrete action, one of which is building the farm system of basketball. I think that that's something that LeBron James spoke about. That's something that we've already seen gradually developing with athletes choosing instead to go play overseas, or athletes, taking a gap year in some form or another. And the reality is, I mean, this has been happening for a long, long time. And not to quote, LeBron again, he said, "Has anybody ever seen the movie Blue Chips?" I mean, this isn't a new phenomenon. I think it's just something that the NCAA can no longer run from and will have to address. The game of basketball has to address. Other sports, baseball, I mean, college baseball is great, but they have that other option, the farm system, which is a great American pastime, in many small cities all across the United States love their minor league baseball teams, and it's worked really well for the major leagues for years. In Europe, soccer clubs, they have players come join their academies when they're kids, and are professional athletes sometimes as early as 13 years old, and that's worked well for soccer clubs in Europe. So I think it's time for not just the NCAA, but the entire sport of basketball to really take a look in the mirror and decide what they can do to fix this issue that isn't going to go away.
But you know what the big difference is between basketball and baseball is there's no one and done rule. So baseball, the rules are you can come out of high school or you can choose to go to a 4-year college, but you have to stay there for 3 years. So the NCAA is sort of hamstrung in this situation where they can't go straight to the NBA from from high school, and they have to go for this 1 year in college. So it becomes this complete joke where you get the Kentuckys of the world that start over every single year. Duke's starting to become this way a little bit, and it's really ruining the NCAA and the quality of the product. You don't remember names from year to year. It's hard to remember who's on Kentucky's team, and then it ends up being half the NBA 10 years later now, and you think about it, and you think about, wow, could you imagine how good, maybe Kentucky's 2012 team would be if they had John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, you have Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, like all these players. It's ruining the quality in college basketball right now. So I think the rule in itself needs to be changed. They're going to get people who are going to go straight out of high school, and that's of their own choice. And I think a farm system like baseball would be really beneficial for players like that. You would see less, Kwame Browns who are just burnouts if they can develop through that farm system. But you also get the college basketball players that are serious about playing college basketball. They want to get their education, and overall the quality will be better in the NCAA. So it's sort of the NBA that is holding them down at this point with that rule.
Well, you mentioned education, and it's the rule and the idea of going to get an education. That's just not the reality. I mean, these guys are going to school because they have to. They're not going to school. The schools aren't bringing them in to educate these young men. They're just not. They're bringing in these young men to win basketball games, make that NCAA tournament, and go on tournament runs. Give the school publicity. That's why these young men are at these universities. It's not because these universities, out of the kindness of their hearts, are giving them an education. I'm sorry, that's just not the case. And so, given that, yes, I am a firm believer that everybody needs an education. Everybody needs at least some form of a liberal life grounded in critical thinking education, whether it's a year, 2 years, but something that helps them in this game we call life, something that can ground them, give them the skills to make it through life. Basketball, sure, a lot of life lessons can be learned in basketball. Education out on the streets or just everyday life, sure, a lot can be learned in the everyday, but there is something to be said for an education. It's great to see somebody like John Wall going back to Kentucky, getting his education, getting his business degree now. I heard was mentioned during the Sixers game the other night. So it's tough to find this balance. And right now there's a huge gap. You have these kids coming into universities, getting a sham of an education. I mean, not always the case. Obviously, what I'm speaking about now are the Kentuckys, are the Arizonas, are the Dukes. Believe it or not, at an institution like Duke, at UNC, who's gotten in trouble for this exact issue. And so I think, again, it's something that the NCAA has been very hypocritical about for years, and it's time that they finally face their demons and take this issue seriously and give kids another outlet where they can develop as basketball players and as young men before they really get into the real world and have to make serious decisions and play in the more important and larger game called life.
All right, fine discussion here, guys. All of that said, go ahead, say you can leave after high school or you got to stay 3 years. Totally fine. We can discuss whether the European soccer model is best. We're, at the end of the day, coming back to a discussion of paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for these players to come to school. Why do they do that? Because these schools produce money, and there's television contracts that are set in place for 10 years, and that money is going to be driven by how many NCAA tournament games you win, how many conference games you win, and all that is going to determine in the long run how many times you're on television and what type of revenue you drive. So great if you want to change the rule, all that's fine. There will still be this issue. And I don't think throughout this discussion, it's been a good one, I don't think we've identified really the issue itself in terms of why the money is changing hands. Just if DeAndre Ayton goes directly to the NBA, guys, that's great. Some other player who's now going to be the top player to go to college is going to be in the same situation, and the schools are going to be in the same lucrative situation where this means a lot more to them than the $40,000 that is paid as a scholarship. And so as a result, they need to get to the core of the issue. I don't think we've done that. I don't know how to do that because incentives are misaligned at this point.
So you think even though they'd be getting, quote unquote, the second-rate stars, that there'd still be the money exchanging hands? I disagree, and here's why, is because the money is generally exchanging hands, via a third party and an agent, an NBA agent for another team. So when you take away the athletes going to be lottery picks, and you're going to second tier players, I don't know who that would be. Somebody, late first round pick. I think you're right. There's always going to be something corrupt about it. But
Cam Newton had nothing to do with an agent.
Okay.
That was a booster issue. And I know that's football and not basketball.
Right. Yeah,
so
boosters are a whole other story.
And I don't know that we've gotten anywhere near the crux of that because, to take my own words, I don't think I'm addressing the core of that issue because that's not what we're talking about here today. My point being is changing the rule is great if we think it affords opportunities for young kids, maybe not from the best economic situation, to pursue their dreams a little quicker. The one thing I'd take issue with is you're saying there'd be less burnouts, less Kwame Browns if there was a developmental league. I'd argue that there are more players that are drafted high in a baseball scenario that never make it than basketball because there's just less rungs to get up the ladder. But all that said is I don't know if that changing those rules is going to change exactly how the economics of basketball operates. Acknowledging what you're saying about the agents and that there's not quite – I mean, there's still going to be prospects and lottery picks every year coming out of college, even if it is 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years out.
Yeah, and I think if you talk about, paying these athletes based on, what we're seeing in Michigan State and Arizona – what you were talking about, Tom, the market value for them is going to be a little bit less if the quality of the NCAA is not as good, if people are going straight from high school to the NBA. But really, at the end of the day, the NCAA is making money because the players are really good, the talent is good, people enjoy watching this style of basketball, and the NCAA is making tons and tons of money off that. Now you can make some arbitrary rule that they can't get paid, and that's up to the NCAA right now. I know we've gone back and forth on this a lot, but at the end of the day, the market is determining how much money these kids deserve to get. NBA players are now paid off the charts because it's so popular and people enjoy watching it. And to have a guy like LeBron James on your team, you're going to recruit thousands of fans to watch your games, and it's worth it to pay that guy millions and millions of dollars to play for you. So in the same sense for college basketball, it's the same exact thing. It's going to be much less than the NBA, but the market is going to drive that value and how much these guys need to be paid. But that obviously gets very tricky in the NCAA because it's not just football or basketball. It's also all the women's sports and other, men's sports as well. You run into issues with Title IX and things like that, and women have to be paid equally despite, the revenue share is vastly different. So it would never, ever work out. Unfortunately.
If we're going purely economics, right, and it is a market-driven model, are we really saying that the quarterback of Alabama is going to be paid more than the quarterback of, let's just give it another Power 5 school, the University of Kentucky, right? And then what happens when Jalen Hurts decides to transfer this year? Does that salary carry with him? Does the school that he transfers to, do they have to take that on? Say, the NHL just went through the NHL deadline. Does Alabama have to pick up half of that salary? I mean, what happens? And there's no draft picks to exchange, right? So if a team really wants to bring somebody in, can they, like soccer, give allocation money to another team in order to recruit a quarterback? And then how much of the offensive linemen work? And at the end of the day, right, when we're talking economics, you're willing to pay up until the point where your marginal cost equals the marginal revenue that you're receiving from, say, that player. And so at the end of the day, we will have all the schools from the Power 5 with football programs. We will have maybe 50 or so schools with basketball programs, and that's it. Is that the college model that we like? I mean, perhaps that's a little bit dramatic, but it's not that far off.
So it's not a salary system like the way you're seeing it. It would just be purely a signing bonus. That's what you're seeing right now. You're not really seeing guys getting a yearly salary of, a couple $100,000. It's these guys getting paid to go to that school off the top.
So what happens then when Jalen Hurts signs with Alabama, has that signing bonus, and then decides he can't play there anymore and goes to play for Lane Kiffin down at Florida Atlantic? Does he have to pay back the portion he didn't use?
No.
Well, maybe no. I mean, so it's just he could come there day one, quit football, be done.
Well, you have to write that into the contract with the guy.
Okay, so what happens if he transfers?
Well, you have stipulations. So you say, let's say, you want to give Jalen Hurts $100,000 to come to Alabama. You have a $10,000 signing bonus up front, and if you stay for 1 year, you get $50,000. If you stay for 2 years, you get $70,000.
So it's not an upfront signing bonus.
It is and it isn't. It's not a salary, but it's a signing bonus with stipulations that you stay a certain amount of time.
It's no different than the contract the athletes already sign with universities in getting their scholarship to go to the schools academically. It's if you don't live up to expectations, if you decide that you're quitting the team, then to the discretion of the coach, there goes your scholarship.
The discretion of the coach.
So
that could get interesting.
So it's the contract the athletes already sign. It wouldn't change. Now it's just in addition to getting a free education, you're getting an additional $100,000.
It would be tough to write in something about if you get cut because it could be so many different reasons. You could put in, performance incentives and things like that. If you're a running back and you rush for 1,000 yards, you get this much, just like any NFL contract, really. But I don't know that
there'd be a lot of lawyers.
Because then you'd end up with people who are, a redshirt junior, and he's like, on the fence, but he was highly recruited, so I'm just going to cut him now. Even though he may have some chance to play in the NFL, just going to cut him now to save us some money. So you wouldn't want to have situations like those.
Well, what say you, audience? We are talking about Of course, all stemming from the FBI probe and the investigation and Sean Miller. Oh, by the way, I want to get one more comment on that because we didn't really address the later part of what I was saying, is that some of this information might have been incorrect, and there are high-profile lawyers that strongly believe that Sean Miller will end up being, quote-unquote, as he said, vindicated in this process, and that DeAndre Ayton's family strongly suggests that he did not receive a dime, and now the timeline does not add up with Mark Schlabach's initial reporting. Now, I think anybody sitting here in this room is going to be a little bit suspect about that, because, okay, where's the information coming from? This shouldn't be a witch hunt, and we know by and large that there has to be some validity to all of this because all of these names came out. However, why did they botch the timeline so much, and why doesn't this line up with DeAndre Ayton's commitment, actual commitment in September 2016, whereas Schlabach's reporting mentioned spring of 2017, which is after the time frame that these wiretapping instructions and these wiretapping results occurred. It's really interesting. So anybody out there in the Facebook Live community, give us a shout here on BLS. And this is the Villanova Basketball Report. Bob Long, Tom Trainer, and Kevin Long.
Well, and it's really important that you mentioned, Bob. So it's Schlabach's reporting. So this is not an official FBI, indictment or release.
No indictment.
This is purely, journalistic reporting based on evidence they've gathered. So this is very different. So this is the tip of the iceberg. This is similar to what's been happening, in our political landscape with the Russian investigation. It's like a little bit gets leaked out at a time, and the reality is, when it's all said and done, we at this point in time, in this scenario and our political scenario, probably know very, very, very little from what we will know, in due time. So I think that this is, and I think it's telling, back to Kevin's, one of his original points, I think it is telling that Sean Miller did not coach at Oregon. Based on this current evidence, I think in any courtroom he would be vindicated or acquitted of whatever he would, in this current evidence. But I'm saying all of this to say that I highly doubt that this is the only evidence they have. I'm sure there's much more to this and much more to it. As has been suggested on plenty of other programs and coaches,
right?
Which gets back to our larger discussion, which is this isn't just a Sean Miller problem. This is a much bigger NCAA and basketball problem. And I wanted to refer back to something that Kevin had said about, and the point you guys have been making, I guess, speaking to your point about if you change the system, money would still be exchanging hands. And, you mentioned basketball programs bringing in money, basketball being the revenue-generating sport for the NCAA. And it's not just basketball or the basketball season. It is one specific part of the basketball season, and that is the NCAA tournament. March Madness generates a vast majority of all NCAA revenue for a given year. So with that said, you're right. It really isn't the names on the backs of the jerseys that attracts people to watch March Madness. It is the excitement, the atmosphere.
Tournament format.
Exactly. It is the format of the tournament. It's the schools, that are involved. It's you getting to put money on it in your office or family pool and filling out your bracket. It's all of that. It's not the names on the back of the jerseys that brings in the money for the NCAA. So I think to that point, and to the point that you guys, were making, that you were touching on, that you don't think it would change much, I think that in itself speaks to your point.
Villanova Basketball Report here. Bob Long, Tom Trainer, Kevin Long. So we were talking to a good friend and a big fan of the LaSalle Explorers, and he said, we might be seeing you in a Sweet 16 matchup at this point, given the amount of teams that are ensconced in this right now. And of course, I think that's a little bit of hyperbole, but at the end of the day, we've been told that this could impact things as early as the 2018 NCAA tournament. I don't know how realistic that is as we sit here at the end of February, but as this began to be coming out, we were told that that could be the case. We'll certainly have to underscore that as we go along. Now, Villanova's name did come up in this discussion, and it was through loans from ASM to Kyle Lowry and Antonio Pena, and there was a third that unfortunately it's escaping me, but Antonio Pena, and Malik Wayans. So what must be said there is that Kyle Lowry has worked with and is a client of Andy Miller. Antonio Pena and Malik Wayans, it's expected and it's at least thought that these loans came in relatively small dollar amounts and after their careers at Villanova ended, based upon where they were listed in the ledger by date. So it has to be thrown out there that this came up. Villanova's name came up. Jay Wright has no dealings as far as we understand. It was directly with players, loans to players, and we believe that those came after their playing careers at Villanova were done. But Dawkins did have dinner with quote-unquote Villanova coaches, which is very subjective and it's very abstract. And in and of itself, that is not illegal. But tangentially speaking, Villanova is connected to this, and it must at least be stated. So that's a good long discussion there about it. I think it's worthy of the time. But we'll take a quick detour now to talk about the Villanova-Creighton game and the fact that they've relinquished their lead in the Big East regular season race, dropping their fourth game in the conference play. So now with 4 losses, 1 loss behind Xavier in the loss column. Call it equivalently a half-game deficit to Xavier. If Xavier were to stumble tomorrow night against Providence or in their season finale against DePaul, Villanova could still claim once again the Big East regular season title. That would be every single Big East title since the reorg of the Big East leading into the 2013-2014 season. So, let's talk. Initial thoughts. Villanova versus Creighton.
So, obviously, Marcus Foster, Kyrie Thomas, big-time players, really carried the team throughout the game, had a very, very good game. But again, this game looked a lot like the Wisconsin game last year at the end of the game. They had a big guy, Jacob Epperson, a complete nobody. I believe it was only his second game of the year due to injury. And, he really took over the game towards the end. And we had no stop for him. Amari Spellman showed that he cannot guard a big of that size. And that's going to be a problem again. If we run into a guy like Nigel Hayes again in Wisconsin last year, this team is going to struggle. So, Creighton, not a great team, but they had a big that was able to dominate us. Marcus Foster had a good game. Kyrie Thomas had a good game. Overall, Villanova shot the ball pretty well, but, the defense was lacking. And we need to find that guy who is able to cover the other big. And, so far Omari hasn't shown he's able to do it. Demir Cosby-Roundtree is, on the border of not seeing any minutes for the rest of the year. I think he had 2 minutes in the game and looked pretty lost for the majority. 4 minutes. He looked pretty lost out there. So I think Villanova's problems of being able to cover a big were exposed against Creighton on Saturday. And they really need to find an answer to that heading into March.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit, Kev, because I don't think the problem was covering Epperson, is that the name? Himself, the Aussie. I don't think the issue was covering him as much as it was covering one of Bob's favorite schemes
It's
that
coming up
Villanova
next.
hasn't been able to cover all year, and that is the high ball screen. Very simple concept. Villanova hasn't been able to cover it all year long. It is one of the first things you learn as a basketball player in youth basketball. Bob will get into it later, I am sure, because it's something that the Wildcats have struggled with all year. And I said it's a simple concept. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy to defend. It's also one of the most effective concepts, and that's why teams do use it over and over again. That's why you see it used in the NBA, the highest level of basketball, effectively over and over and over again. And it's something that Villanova's just struggled with all year and happened in the Creighton game. Setting high ball screens, Epperson, lob at the rim. It is really difficult to defend. There are ways to do it, which we will get into in a few minutes. But that's the first thing that I want to say, just touching on what you said, Kevin, and what this game just left a really bad taste in my mouth. First of all, that it is going to be most likely, as Bob already mentioned, snapping Villanova's 4-year streak of winning the new Big East regular season championship. And Xavier will most likely win their first. It's not over yet. The fat lady hasn't sung, but it is looking like that will most likely be the case, unfortunately. So that, in itself, as a Villanova fan and a competitive guy, leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And it also, because they had this game won. If you look at every statistical category, virtually every statistical category, it would suggest that Villanova should have won this game. They out-rebounded Creighton. They had less turnovers than Creighton. They should have won this basketball game. The stat that you immediately go to is, they had more shots than Creighton. They had about 10 more shots than Creighton. And speaking of 10 more shots, they took about 10, I believe, they took exactly 10 more shots from 3. One of Kevin's biggest issues with Villanova this year is how many three-point shots they take and how many difficult three-point shots they take. I believe they shot 39 attempts from 3, made 12 of them. Creighton shot 10 less and made 12 attempts. And that's the difference in your ball game right there. Villanova beat Creighton in every other statistical facet of the game. However, they took more difficult shots and did not hit their three-point shots like Creighton did. And another reason it left a bad taste in my mouth is because it didn't have to be that way. Villanova, I thought, could have gotten the ball inside all day if they wanted to, and when they did get the ball inside, they had success. We saw later in the game Eric driving against Epperson, who has about 4 inches on him, very effectively, and I thought they should have used Amari and Eric much more throughout the game, and I think they could have. And so this game, for me, fellas, it's not a game. They were up 68-60 with 4 minutes and 30 seconds left in the game, and they just should not have lost this basketball game. It is a bad loss.
You mentioned Eric Paschal. Well, not to toot our own horns here, but last week's V's and O's, yes, he drove right at Epperson. Where did he drive? Right to the middle of the floor. Opened things up when the defender did not commit. He just kept on going. I mean, that is to a T what we talked about on last week's V's and O's. The issue there, Eric Paschal and Mikael Bridges are playing with foul trouble. Right? They're playing with a lot of foul trouble. Let's take another look at this here. Paschal actually played a decent amount of minutes, but other than Spellman, he's just not going to play that number of minutes. You might want Paschal out there for a couple more minutes, and really more so than the number of minutes, because 33 is not bad, and that'll be at or above most guys' average. He has to play some of that time a little bit more defensively, right? Backing off and not trying to foul, because when you get with 2 or 3 fouls late in the first half, early in the second half, it does change the way you play a little bit. And then Omari Spellman with the high ball screen, we'll talk about it on the other side. It's just a huge issue, and we'll talk about why Creighton took the timing element completely out of the equation for Villanova, and why Villanova simply was exposed. And Epperson is good in terms of disturbing this timing. We'll explain why. But that was a huge issue for Villanova. The other thing, Marcus Foster is one heck of a player. Kyrie Thomas is one heck of a player. And what I saw is the size and the athleticism of those guys made things difficult on the guy who's going for the player of the year in college basketball, Jalen Brunson. 8 for 20. Guys, 4 to 5 of those shots were extremely difficult. So what does that tell you? Jalen Brunson's not getting any separation. And we know that Jalen Brunson does not have the end-to-end 94-feet quickness that you would see from a John Wall or a draft pick like that you would expect to go in the top couple picks at the point guard position. But instead, he's very crafty, and he's shown his ability to hit tough shots, to go up against bigger defenders, and really be successful that way. Tonight, or that night, he was not getting any separation, and that was a big takeaway for me.
Yeah, and I think it's starting to show a little bit obviously Jalen Brunson is one of the best college basketball players in the nation, but he's not super athletic. Doesn't necessarily have the quickness, doesn't have the agility, doesn't have that good first step to beat a guy like a Kyrie Thomas off the dribble. So, he uses his other tools that he's extremely savvy. He's good at backing guys down inside the lane. So when he's squaring up for a three-pointer, guys close in on him because they know that a guy like Jalen Brunson can't beat me off the dribble. He's going to beat you down with his strength.
Really? Would you go that far, though? I'm not going that far. I just think against Creighton he struggled because Foster is really big but every bit as athletic. I don't think there's many guys that are going to present that type of issue with Jalen over the course of the rest of his collegiate career, however long that is. That's just my keep going if that's really what you're thinking. But in terms of Jalen Brunson can't beat you off the dribble, I don't agree with that.
Well, it's all relative here.
Right.
You're talking about a guy like Kyrie Thomas. He's not going to beat off the dribble. You talk
Right.
about other college basketball players that are potentially NBA prospects, and he's not necessarily the fastest of that bunch, and probably for the most part isn't going to beat them off the dribble. Now you take the average Big East team, sure, yeah, he's going to beat the average Big East point guard off the dribble, absolutely. But compared to someone like that, that's all I'm saying. That when he has those matchups that aren't necessarily in his favor, he is shown to struggle and force some threes up, and he's got a lot of defense right in his face because the other guy may be slightly a tick faster than he is.
I know we got to get to the break, but I actually am going to disagree with both of you. I think Jalen got plenty of good looks against Creighton, and for whatever reason just didn't knock them down. I just think he had a poor day shooting. From my memory, and unfortunately we don't have the game tape to pull up, it'd be great to take a look at, but I recall him having plenty of open looks, especially from three. And
I'll give you that.
He was 1 of 5 from three. Uncharacteristically missing shots, and so I did think he got his, and he's a really crafty player. He always gets around his lack of speed. He's always found a way around it, and that's just because he's always been, as everybody knows the story, thanks to his dad Rick. He's really a student of the game and has all of the tricks in his toolbox.
What about the ones he did make?
I
thought some of the ones he made were extremely high difficulty.
Oh, sure. Driving against Epperson late in the game for the and one.
Getting on your pivot foot, spinning, firing over a taller guy.
He has really become a master making that turnaround fadeaway jump shot with a hand right in his face. I don't know how he gets the shot off, let alone makes it half of the time. But another just quick stat that I wanted to point out is it's not going to sound terrible, but it feels so much worse, I feel like, during the game when it's happening. Villanova this year, I believe they're still above 75%, maybe between 75-80% as a free throw shooting team. But I just feel like the game, when they've missed free throws in games this year, it just feels huge. So they went 11 of 14 against Creighton at the line on Saturday, but it's the free throws that they missed. Jalen missed one late in the game. Dante, of course, missed one that could have inevitably won the game. And then I think back to losing at Butler. And then some other times when they were trying to claw back against St. John's. And it just feels like, this is probably actually one of the worst free throw shooting teams that Jay has had. But they're still a solid free throw shooting team. They just seem to... The ones they miss just seem to really hurt. I don't know if you guys have noticed that or felt the same way.
You're coming dangerously close to a word we don't like.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying that it's a stat that I was shocked to see it was 11 of 14,
right? Because
it felt like it was like 6 of 14 or something like that. It just felt like. Make your free throws. Well, they made it 11 of 14,
sure.
Which is a solid percentage.
That's decent, getting to the line 14 times, but there have been games, especially even the win against Xavier, they're just not getting to the line as much as you might like, and that's because they're not getting inside.
And not nearly as much as a Jay Wright team usually does.
So we're going to talk about a lot of that right on the other side. This is the Villanova Basketball Report. Certainly we went long there, and I anticipate the show going long, but appreciate everybody hanging with us because we have a lot more to get to. We have V's and O's, and then we're going to talk about high school basketball here in Philadelphia, and hang with us because it will be a lot of fun. There are some 2019, 2020 names, guys, that we really need to be aware of here at Villanova, and just about all of them were playing in their either district playoffs or league playoffs. This is one of the best cities in the country for high school basketball. And listen, Villanova's looking at a lot of these guys. We'll go through them in depth on the other side, but only after our V's and O's. We're excited to bring that to you next here on BLS, and it's the Villanova Basketball Report.
What does your character look like? Does it bounce back after each setback? Does it stand out by standing up? Does it make good on good intentions? Character is invisible until it's not. Only through action will the world know what it's made of, what you're made of. Find out how you can strengthen the character of your community alongside empowered veterans and families of the fallen at travismanion.org.
People ask me why I'm giving up a year of my life to help kids. I say, who says I'm giving up anything?
If kids who drop out are 8 times more likely to end up in prison, do we open more prisons or mines?
What's going on, folks? This is Bob Long from Bob Long Sports. We're live here at the Wells Fargo Center before each and every Philadelphia Soul home game. We record this now before Arena Bowl 30, and the Philadelphia Soul, the winningest team in Philadelphia. Bob Long Sports is your spot for live video pregame shows with Bob Long, Eric Nash, and Rob Stott. We even have the opportunity to talk with the AFL Commissioner, Scott Butera. We appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. You do a terrific job, and God bless all of you and the folks in Philadelphia. I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate it.
Tune in before every home game for the Philadelphia Soul official pregame show on Bob Long Sports. Welcome back, everybody. Time for V's and O's here on the Villanova Basketball Report. Bob Long, we have Tom Trainer and Kevin Long here in the studio as well. So, Villanova certainly struggled again defensively against the high ball screen. Man, I tell you, I think I can see the streak marks here on this whiteboard where we did this diagram just a couple weeks ago. But we'll do it again. Up top, Villanova guards. Let's call him Jalen Brunson here. He is guarding Marcus Foster of the Creighton Blue Jays. Go with me. They'll be the red team this evening. Omari Spellman down here. Omari guarding Jacob Epperson, the big. Epperson comes up, sets a ball screen for... Actually, you know what? We're going to go... He's going to go this way, actually, and set a ball screen right there for Marcus Foster. So Omari, making his way up here, stops right here. And at this point, I'm starting to think this is exactly what Jay Wright and the coaching staff is asking him to do. Doesn't make me any happier about it, but I think that's what's happening. Because Marcus Foster then comes off this screen. Jalen Brunson is blocked off right here. He can go no further because of the screen set by the big man Epperson. And then Marcus Foster can either pull up from right here because Spellman is back here, or he can drive around the big man. And Omari Spellman has shown that he can recover and make some blocks pretty well. I think a reason for that is because he plays it safe. And he's so far back from where he needs to be in the face of a shooter, if, in fact, Villanova wants to switch. But A lot of times what we saw in the year when they were relatively successful against the high ball screen is that after an initial hedge, Omari Spellman would have to come back here and guard Epperson as he rolled back, and Jalen would then fight through this screen and get over here. That didn't happen, and the reason why is because Epperson showed his athleticism. He would immediately slip to the hole. Jalen Brunson has no chance to guard him. Marcus Foster, as soon as he came around this screen, would lob the ball to the hoop, and Epperson would be able to finish either catching the ball and then laying it up / dunking it, or all in one motion in an alley-oop. How does this impact timing? Well, Villanova essentially is trying to hedge and recover, but you can't recover in that short a period of time. So to the extent that a team has the ability to make life difficult on Villanova and can immediately move the big to the hole and create that opportunity, Villanova is going to get beaten every single time. So they continue to struggle guarding the high ball screen. They stayed pretty much in man the entire evening. We mentioned a couple weeks ago how in the zone, I think you could bring both guards to the top, essentially smother that guy making the pick and force the point guard to make a decision. But again, that's not necessarily relevant for this specific discussion. Now, Tom mentioned this before in the last segment, and that's how offensively Eric Paschal provided a lot of opportunity getting to the hole and beating big men. We mentioned it last week, but we'll go through it a little bit again because Mikael Bridges is the guy that I need to see more of this out of. If Eric Paschal is out here on the wing, he does such a good job if he's guarded by a guy out here of driving into the middle of the lane. He can either draw a second defender from out here, whether it's Dante DiVincenzo out here to fire out for a three, Colin Gillespie, who likes to be on the baseline, he can be here for a three, or Eric Paschal can just continue on to the basket and finish because he's shown his ability to finish at the hoop very well, even over taller bigs. So in this way, he shows the ability to drive but also kick because he's a decent passer and has good floor vision. He's a very skilled big man in that way. Or he can just take it to the hole and jam it like he's shown the ability to do as well. Now, Mikael Bridges, as Villanova has run this weave-style offense recently, if Jalen Brunson is up here and Mikael Bridges is over here, we've seen Jalen run this way and then maybe start to drive and flip back to Mikael, who starts coming this way. Maybe he's thrown a pass from Eric Paschal. Essentially, he's catching from beyond the three-point line and firing away. We're not seeing the Mikael Bridges that we saw against Gonzaga, which is what I really want to see. Take all this out of the equation. He catches the ball right here, drives into the lane with the right hand, as he's much more adept at than the left, and just throws it down somebody's throat. I mean, he's not getting into the lane the way he is able to and the way that NBA scouts want him to be. Yeah, they want him to be a 3-and-D guy, but he can also be a guy that can slash and finish at the hoop. I think Eric Paschal is showing you that, hey, listen, I can go with my left hand, get into the lane, and create opportunities. Mikael Bridges can do the exact same thing. He's going to dribble with the right hand. And I think he can create opportunities for other guys as well. Maybe a little bit less of the weave and shuck, and maybe a little bit less as well of the individual basketball where we see him. And listen, I'm not saying he takes this out of this game, but where he comes down here and just starts backing a guy, cuts inside, and tries to put it in as everybody else spaces the floor, and they count on single coverage defense down low. So this was a lot. There's a lot of squiggly lines going back and forth, but conceptually, from a defense perspective, they got absolutely torched because Creighton took away their timing, the hedge and recovery. They didn't give them time to do that. And then offensively, they're just not getting inside enough, and that's a huge issue. And one guy that I think can really lead that resurgence is Mikael Bridges, because he's an unbelievable driver. He has got great athleticism, and he just gets so quickly to the hoop. One dribble, two dribbles, and he can jam it on you starting beyond the three-point line. So that's our V's and O's segment this week. Certainly hope you enjoyed it. And on the other side, we'll wrap up our thoughts on college basketball. We'll talk about the high school circuit and where Villanova's 2019 class could at least start with in terms of this talent locally. And then we'll do also our Pick'em segment, and we're excited to be back on the other side.
Mayfair's neighborhood Ford store.
Nobody knows your neighborhood like Dunphy Ford.
Nearly 40 years.
Right here on Frankfort Avenue.
Generation after generation. Our neighbors continue to be our customers. We have access to the cars and trucks you want with financing you need.
Dunphy Ford is Northeast Philly's first choice for America's #1 brand. 7700 Frankfort Avenue in Mayfair. Online at www.dunphyford.com.
Come experience the Dunphy difference. You'll be glad you did.
What does your character look like? Does it bounce back after each setback? Does it stand out by standing up? Does it make good on good intentions? Character is invisible until it's not. Only through action will the world know what it's made of, what you're made of. Find out how you can strengthen the character of your community alongside empowered veterans and families of the fallen at travismanion.org.
People ask me why I'm giving up a year of my life to help kids. I say, who says I'm giving up anything?
If kids who drop out are 8 times more likely to end up in prison, do we open more prisons or mines?
What's going on, folks? This is Bob Long from Bob Long Sports. We're live here at the Wells Fargo Center before each and every Philadelphia Soul home game. We record this now before Arena Bowl 30, and the Philadelphia Soul, the winningest team in Philadelphia. Bob Long Sports is your spot for live video pregame shows with Bob Long, Eric Nash, and Rob Stott. We even have the opportunity to talk with the AFL Commissioner, Scott Butera. We appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. You do a terrific job, and God bless all of you and the folks of Philadelphia. I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate it.
Tune in before every home game for the Philadelphia Soul official pregame show on Bob Long Sports. Welcome back, everybody. It's the Villanova Basketball Report straight out of our chalkboard V's and O's segment. Bob Long, Tom Trainer, Kevin Long. Now, guys, what stuck out to you about that segment?
So I was looking at your offensive setup that you had up here on the board. You since erased.
Yes.
So you show all these guys, hovering around the three-point line. No real back down offensive player inside the lane. So this is a question for you, Bob. If you think, is this a good strategy for Villanova to keep the lane open for a potential driver because you have guys like Jalen and Mikael and Eric that are so good at that? Or would it be more beneficial for a guy like Omari to be able to back down a defender despite his ability to hit a three-point shot?
I think he shouldn't be living on the block. I think he can get there on the baseline, maybe 8 feet from the hoop. Clearly, he's coming up and setting high ball screens as well. The issue, I think, is that he's not doing the Jacob Epperson and not rolling to the hoop. Instead, he's popping out at the top of the key. He's a very good three-point shooter, a decent free throw shooter, but a good three-point shooter, and actually one of the more efficient ones on the team. All that said, he also has an ability that none of those other three-point shooters have to really get down inside. He's a good rebounder, and I think really the issue, less so about him generating offense at the block, is that he's not there for rebounds. So when they're in rhythm, you're almost not realizing, but we're sitting here realizing there's nobody rebounding down there. I think he's also been good at times where he's caught the ball back to the basket, then faced up and shot over top of a guy. I think that's been relatively efficient. It also improves his chance of getting a rebound. But no, generally I think you're exactly right in that they play really just one guy inside the lane at any given time. The other 4 guys are out and around the key. I don't think they should radically change their offense, but in the last 3 weeks, I think it's really been a struggle to get buckets inside, and I think that can be tweaked. I really do. I think you can have maybe Eric Paschal go inside every so often, or just a little bit more movement out off the ball instead of just standing beyond the 3-point line, and you can kind of manufacture what it is you're asking for.
I think that the answer is, one, you're never going to see anything radically change. I mean, they have the J-Wright, 4 out, 1 in motion offense. It is what it's gonna, what it has been, since he stepped foot on the main line. That's just what it's going to be, and it's worked effectively for them for years. With the 4 guard, or having 4 guys who can handle the basketball at all times. But that doesn't mean that you can't have that offense and have, back down post players, which they did very effectively with Daniel Ochefu. I think it's something that Amari Spellman is very capable of doing, and I think we've seen at times this year. I mean, he's looked really, really good. The times we've seen him go over, either shoulder, has looked really, really good doing it. And it scratched my head sometimes. I don't know why they don't do it more often. I mean, they have the setup, and they used to do it with Daniel all the time, where you could have him set a ball screen and then roll, and he doesn't necessarily have to get the ball on that from the person he just screened for. So I'm not going to go back to the whiteboard, but if you just envision, if he sets the ball screen and the person swings the ball, and after he's rolled, 50% of the time that team is going to have switched. So he's going to have a smaller player on him, or the bigger player, if they haven't switched, is going to be out of position. All of a sudden, you dump it down to him on the post, and we see Daniel really effectively, especially in that national championship game against a much larger North Carolina team, very effectively get the ball in the post several times. Daniel, very nice post moves to get some easy buckets for Wildcats. So I think, as Bob said, you're not going to see any drastic changes, but in this system, it can be done, and it has been done very effectively for the Wildcats in the past.
Yeah, if Amari's going to become a back-down offensive player, it's something he's going to have to work on in the offseason. It's just not something that's really in his repertoire right now. You never see it for the most part, maybe earlier in the season, but in general, if he has his back to the basket, he's trying to turn around and face up on you. If he's down on the block, you see him all the time facing up, maybe, a couple pumps, and then he goes up with it. I would love to see him use his body to back down more defenders from time to time. And like you and Bob were saying, pick and roll to the hoop and not just pop right out at the 3-point line, because you have 3 other players waiting to do the same exact thing. And with a guy with Omari's size, that's not what we need him to do right now for Villanova. Maybe that's more of an NBA style thing for him, but right now for Villanova, he needs to be driving to the basket and rolling to the basket.
So you say you want a post-up guy. Is that what I'm hearing? Well, you don't have to wait long, because at the high school level, there's a big-time player that's playing tonight, by the way. Might already be done. At the Leacour Center, last night was the pleasure for the Philadelphia Catholic League. But in the Suburban 1 semifinals on the road to the state tournament, the Abington Ghosts are led by Eric Dixon, a guy who already has 9 offers, and Villanova's at the top of his list. So PA rank amongst juniors, the 4th overall player and the 22nd rated player in his class. He's only 6'6" right now, but may still be growing. He's a wide body, and he's best with his back to the basket. A lefty, really, really good player, and quite frankly, guys, just shows up as bigger and stronger than just about everybody else in high school basketball. And as we go through this segment, it's important to remember that Philadelphia high school basketball is just unbelievable. I was at the Palestra last night, and that crowd was overflowing and then some. Couldn't get to our seats. Just had to find somewhere to post up and watch what was an unbelievable game between Roman Catholic and Bonner-Prendie. These are 2 teams that have big-name college recruits that A lot of these guys are only juniors. Roman only plays one senior. He's not playing college basketball. Bonner-Prendie only plays one senior at the starting position. He's going to Ryder. That's Ajiri Johnson, who's going to be a good player at the college level. But let's take a look at this Bonner-Prendie team. First of all, Isiah Wong. It's a name that you're going to want to become familiar with. He transferred into Bonner this year. In terms of the players out of the state of New Jersey, that's where he lives, over in Trenton. Number 1 overall player. And in terms of the combo guard rank, he is the 7th ranked combo guard in his class. Now, Villanova, you see them on the bottom half of this discussion. Clearly, very much in the early stages for this kid. The 44th rated player nationally at his position and 105th total. Rated as a 4-star. Phenomenal player, great ball handling, the ability with those long strides to get where he needs to go. He showed the ability to finish, and he played all night against another guy that's going to be a top player. But this kid in 2020, you may recognize the name, Lynne Greer III, the 49th rated player out of his class and a 4-star. He leads the Roman Catholic Cahillites and was able to take the clock down for about a minute and 25, minute and 30 seconds down to the last possession, got down to about 6, got into the lane, drew a defender, weak side, found his teammate Hakeem Hart, who put it in with 1.6 seconds to play. It was a tie game leading into that possession. Absolutely unbelievable. Early interest from him, Oregon and Penn State, the only 2 teams that are really, really high on his radar. You see the 5 offers, St. Joe's, Temple, and Tulane. Again, maybe I'm just too much of a Penn State homer. Let's say Oregon right now is at the top of that list, but a lot of local interest. And Villanova will absolutely get on the board. You look at these teams below, Virginia, Michigan, Miami, Maryland, and UConn. Clearly a lot of interest in this kid, and it will only increase standing at 6'3" with that athletic pedigree and a phenomenal ball handler who really got it going on in the second half. But maybe the hero of the game last night at the Palestra, that 51-49 victory, was Seth Lundy and his play in the second half. Got into foul trouble, and that's been a little bit of a bugaboo for him. But in the second half, he has been phenomenal. Completely, almost one-man show, took down LaSalle after they had a 15-point lead in the third quarter. That was in a quarterfinal matchup in the Philadelphia Catholic League. Keep in mind, this is one of the best leagues in the country, bar none. This is a guy that I think is under-recruited. The number 4 rated player in his position in PA, as you see on the right, a 4-star on the 24/7 Sports Composite. Villanova has not given him the interest yet. Only Bowling Green and Oregon taking the jump early on the junior Seth Lundy. 6'6", so a little bit undersized, but big, strong, and will continue to develop that shot. He is absolutely one heck of a player. And remember, we're seeing all of these guys on the same night at the Palestra. Last couple guys to talk about, Tariq Ingre from Bonner-Prendie as well. We saw him. He's a junior, 6'9", kind of a Devontae Gardner type, under the basket, but really strong type of player. Decent foul shooter, can finish inside. Another big back-to-the-basket guy. I don't know if he'll get up to Villanova, to be honest with you. In Delaware, he's ranked as the number 13 player and 39 amongst power forwards in his class, and nationally 243 you see on the left-hand side of the screen there, right underneath his name. I don't know that will be a guy that Villanova will target, especially if they're already starting to target some of these other guys in the junior class. And remember, this is still a national recruiting game and not just a local one. But St. Joe's, you see in the mix, Temple, St. John's, Seton Hall. I mean, all these programs could use a guy like this. Heck, Tariq Ingre, very, very much in terms of size, stature, and ability. Well, we'll see if he can get this level, but Angel Delgado type of game. Now, Tom and Kevin, you got to see Bonner-Prendie when we called the game when LaSalle actually was the only team now besides Roman Catholic in the Catholic League to beat Bonner-Prendie this year. Plymouth-Whitemarsh also did it in double overtime. That was in a non-league game. But what did you guys see out of either Wong or Tariq Ingre?
Well, Ingre, you said Angel Delgado. I guess he has Angel Delgado's skills, but he's built more like an Amari Spellman. 6'9", 230, as he showed on the screen. Sure. And his build really is a lot like
Give me my
Omari.
props on the Devontae Gardner reference, though, too, because that's really more his game than Omari's.
Yes,
Devontae Gardner from Marquette, you remember?
Yeah, and I wasn't saying game. He's built like an Omari Spellman.
Sure.
But does not extend, shoot, from distance. He really is a back-to-the-basket player. So, as we were talking, we would like to see Amari Spellman do more of that. Well, Tariq Ingraham is capable of that, and Isiah Wong is just a phenomenal athlete. I mean, the shots he made against LaSalle at that game we were at were unbelievable. Crazy trick shots through traffic. I don't know how he got the shots off, let alone made them. Just very high level of difficulty. He's a special player. He almost willed Bonner back in that game against LaSalle all by himself. He is a very, very special player.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Isiah Wong was a great player, a very good high school prospect at this point. Had some of the intangibles that you're looking for. He's extremely quick off the dribble. He seemed to be a pretty heady player. He seems to understand the game very well for a high school player. Maybe not to the level of a Jalen Brunson, but definitely understands what to do with the basketball and where to be on defense and things like that. So, a long career ahead for Isiah Wong that hopefully ends up with him playing professional basketball in the NBA.
So I think the guys that we really, if you're Villanova fans, right, the class of 2018 is just about closed. With the signing of Javon Quinn early, and again, that is verbal, but we expect in April to hear from Javon that he will be joining the Villanova Wildcats, and of course, that joins Brandon Slater and Cole Swider. Now, what is the common thread there? That there's nobody right in our backyard that Villanova pulled in this relatively big class, the three guys. Now you have, legitimately, let's go through it one more time. Eric Dixon, it looks like, by all intents and purposes, Villanova is the front runner there. Isiah Wong, I think, will be a little bit tougher for Villanova to get, but I think it should be absolutely a priority. And then Lynne Greer, it's just so early to tell, but those are guys that Villanova absolutely will continue to follow up with. Isiah Wong has been a big part of Villanova's identity in terms of this 2019 class. They offered him. They have not offered Lynne Greer the third yet, but it's very early to do that. And like we mentioned, Eric Dixon with the offer to Villanova, and it's quote-unquote warm per scout in terms of the interest level. Last guy I just have to put out there, just because. He's so raw right now. He reminds me of a guy playing down the street here in the Catholic League, Seth Pinkney at 7'1", who's getting looks from like UMass and St. Joe's and really nobody else. He doesn't really have the width in terms of his body or the coordination at this point.
7 foot 195. Whew.
Well, and Naheem McLeod reminds me. He's from Plymouth-Whitemarsh. He reminds me very much of Seth Pinkney over at Archbishop Wood. We'll either have a fantastic game because nobody can stop him, or a defense can do one thing and they can't seem to make an adjustment for him. And that's okay because Ish Horn and Amin Williams and these guards, who, by the way, are not extremely highly thought of in terms of by the way, they're fantastic basketball players, but in terms of Plymouth-Whitemarsh and those kids going to a high D1 school, it just doesn't look like it's going to happen for them. Naheem McLeod, although not nearly the facet of their offense that those two guards are, is going to garner some interest. Villanova, of course, has not made an offer. None of these schools have. You see only the 3-star. And with that size, if he can, over the next year, figure it out, maybe have a good summer with AAU, forget those three names. The schools will come pouring in. So all these guys are right in our backyard, which is really cool. And I don't know if people necessarily know it, but we're getting into a really important part of high school basketball season right now as the Philadelphia Catholic League playoffs just finished up. The Suburban 1 playoffs semifinals were tonight, and then the finals will be on Friday. But then they just continue through the state tournament. Find an opportunity to get to a gym. Go see Abington if they're still playing. Go see Plymouth-Whitemarsh if they're playing. Go see Bonner-Prendie, who will be playing for a long time. And go see Roman Catholic, as they might find themselves on a collision course with Plymouth-Whitemarsh in the semifinals or sooner in the state tournament. It's really just phenomenal, the level that Philadelphia high school basketball is at. I don't really remember it like this in any recent time frame. And there's just so many great players to enjoy with high D1 opportunities ahead of them.
It's exciting, and I think it's part of it has been, and I think we've seen this in a lot of sports, the move to the PIAA in the Philadelphia Catholic League. In 2008, that was the first year where Philadelphia Catholic League schools were able to compete for Pennsylvania state championships in the PIAA. And we've seen it's kind of like, tide raises all boats in a bunch of sports. We've seen a bunch of success in football, in lacrosse, in baseball, in cross country, and in every sport. Swimming, it's been all across the board. Catholic League teams winning championship after championship. And part of that is, because you have these athletes who may have always wanted to go to a Catholic League school, but it didn't have the pool. And you can tell kids, come to LaSalle, come to the Prep, come to Bonner, Archbishop Wood, come to Roman and play for a state championship. That has a different ring to it, and I think it means something. So I think that has been a tremendous help to the Philadelphia Catholic League. It's always been a phenomenal league, don't get me wrong, but I think it's risen to new heights in many sports, basketball in particular, thanks to, in this new era, we are now a decade in of Philadelphia Catholic League schools playing for state championships, and they've been a force to be reckoned with.
And it's been a very, very big debate as well in terms of whether that's proper or not, and we'll leave that to the pundits that be. But it is time for the Pick'em Challenge. Dun, 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 dun.
Well, we had some controversy last week, which I won't dive into. Suffice it to say, Bob's picks... must have been some glitch with the ESPN app that Bob was using to get the lines for his games that didn't match up with the official lines via Vegas and OddsShark and the other betting companies out there. So Bob, unfortunately, had to scratch his Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, and his San Diego State Air Force games because there were big discrepancies in the lines there, big difference in points. The game that he was able to take from the week was his Big East game, St. John's over Marquette. Marquette was a 5-point favorite, and unfortunately for Bob, Marquette ran away with that one 85-73, so -7 points, and they have agreed that the other two games will be erased from the total for the week, and Bob is picking 2 extra games this week, which we will get to in a minute. But Bob was left then with -7 points after coming into that week with 83, which leaves him at 76 points overall. Kevin, all 3 of his picks were just fine as per usual. Came into the week 25.5 total points. He picked Kentucky over Arkansas. Huge pick for Kevin. Arkansas, a 5-point favorite, and Kentucky got a big win for themselves at Arkansas, 87-72. So that's a 30-point victory for Kevin. In his Big East game, another big win for Kevin. He picked Seton Hall over Providence. The Friars were favored by 1.5 points. Seton Hall prevailed 89-77, 23.5 points for Kev in that one. His only loss of the week was Texas over Kansas State. Kansas State favored by 3 points. Kansas State went on to win by 10, 58-48 in a low-scoring affair. -7 points there. 46.5 points for the week. A big week for Kevin, giving him 72 overall. So as we stand going into the final week, Bob, of course, has 2 extra games to pick this week to make up for last week. But as we stand at the moment, 76-72, Bob in front. What do we got for this week, boys, as we come into the final stretch?
All right, so I'll lead us off here. Went big on the SEC this week. Started off with Tennessee on the road over Mississippi State. Tennessee, a 1.5-point underdog. I just like that line. I like the way Tennessee's been playing. Didn't really understand the line. I guess Mississippi State has played well at home, but I remember when I was burned by them at Vanderbilt, at a 9-win Vanderbilt team. So I'm going to take Tennessee.
Well, and Kevin, we can already give you good news on that one as the Volunteers crushed Mississippi State 76-54. So that is a huge victory for Kevin. That's my math, 33.5 points in that game. That's a big way to start off the final week.
Bulldogs did not tap the rock.
Yeah, they
on this
did
night.
not. So, well, great start for me. That's awesome news. Another team I've been going with a lot this year hasn't exactly worked out for me. Auburn over Arkansas this week, 2-point dog. Arkansas, I was not impressed with their game last week against Kentucky. I think Auburn is playing right now better than even Kentucky, so I'm taking Auburn in this matchup as well. And then my final game, my Big East game, I have St. John's at home, 2-point dog versus Butler. I like the way that St. John's has been playing. Sometimes you never know what you're going to get out of St. John's, but playing at Madison Square Garden, they've been playing a lot better. When you have Shamori Pons, you always have a shot. So going with St. John's over Butler.
There you go. I like it. So I got to pick 5, and I have a bad feeling already. So I went with some smaller conference games, just trying to throw something out there, and I picked Bowling Green over Ohio. Just, it was a couple points in Ohio's favor. Well, they were correct. The odds makers were correct because they got absolutely...
Well, actually, they were wrong because it was a blowout.
There you go. Exactly.
Ohio 75-59.
Then I picked Ball State. I think it was +1 for them, and they got beat by 24 points. So things are going good so far.
The Mid-American, beware.
But then I picked Florida +1.5, and I think that game might have gone final by now. But we can check on that. The other 2 games I'm picking tomorrow is Seton Hall +6.5 against Villanova. Tough squad. Always a tough matchup up there. Probably should come down to the last few possessions. Certainly could be wrong. Wouldn't be upset if I was wrong there, but I think I like Seton Hall at least to cover. And then tomorrow's Big Ten tournament. Give me Iowa +1 in the opening game of their Big Ten tourney run at Madison Square Garden. The first time it's been a week earlier. So I like Iowa over Illinois +1 for the Hawkeyes.
Well, Bob, do you want some good news?
Please.
You said
Begging
you said Florida over Alabama, correct?
That's correct. What are you going to do?
All right, well, the Gators came to your rescue, beating the Tide 73-52.
Whoo! How about it?
Big one. We got a ball game, folks.
So does that put me? No, it doesn't put me at even. I'm still down for the week. Got to catch up.
That's big, though. That's big for you. And that was Iowa, that last game?
Iowa +1 over Illinois. That could be the ender. That could really be the decider of this whole thing.
Absolutely. It's funny how this game has sort of evolved here. We both kind of figured out the tricks and the trades to this one.
It's one trick.
There's really just one. Pick a team that's just slightly an underdog and ride them.
Because you win an extra 10 points for any upset. Doesn't matter what the size of the upset is. Mm-hmm. Perhaps next year we'll come up with slightly different. Yeah. But you know what? We took advantage.
Yeah. We were hovering around 0 in the negatives for a long time, and now we're both around 100.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Even after our teams get beat by 20-some points. But a 10-point win, when you pick an upset, can get you right back to even. That's the cool part.
Absolutely.
Cool. So there you go. That's our pick'em. And do you have any Jeopardy trivia for us,
We
Tom?
do have trivia. 2 questions again this week. So, for starters, Villanova Wildcats are going for an unprecedented 8 straight victories against the Georgetown Hoyas, their rivals from Washington, D.C., this weekend. The first question for the Long brothers is back to the old Big East. I like when believe we had started the season with a trivia question about the original Big East. So going for 8 straight against Georgetown, against which school does Villanova have the longest, not active streak, but ever winning streak against? And make a guess as to how many games that was. The answer may surprise you.
Can you repeat that one more time?
So, against which original Big East foe does Villanova have the largest ever winning streak? So not active, but, in their head-to-head history, against which Big East foe at any point in time did they have the longest ever winning streak? And take a guess at how many games that was.
All right, I guess.
Yeah, I have a guess, and I feel like this is a familiar question. I almost feel like this was asked before. Maybe it was slightly different.
It was not.
Okay.
All right, who wants to guess first?
I guess I'll lead us off here. My guess is going to be Boston College. I'm going to say 11.
Okay. I am just going to think that he's trying to, I don't know why, I think he's trying to throw something fun at us, and I'm going to say that the team that Villanova hasn't beaten for a while, Pitt, is actually the team that they beat when they struggled. So I'll say maybe in the early-ish, like maybe late 90s-ish, and I'll say 9 games.
Incorrect. Kevin was pretty close. Boston College, I believe Villanova, both Boston College and St. John's, Villanova had streaks at one point of 13 victories. Pitt, I think it was maybe around 6 or 7 from the statistics I saw. But the answer is Connecticut. The UConn Huskies, from entering the Big East to so in the 80s, the decade of the 80s, Villanova at one point in time won 14 straight against the Connecticut Huskies.
That's a good question.
A part of I believe a 19-2 run the Wildcats had against the Huskies to start their membership in the Big East Conference.
There you go. That's a good question.
What
else?
And the second one. The second one we have here won't be as much of a shot in the dark, I don't think, because you both were alive for this. So Villanova, as it's been discussed, about this great record they have of not having lost back-to-back basketball games since the 2012-2013 season. Who were the last 2 opponents to beat Villanova back-to-back?
Yeah. Okay. I got you, I think, but I just trying to remember this first team.
Answers in, please.
I'll throw something out there for you. So North Carolina, they lost to in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and then I believe that it was Louisville. Kev?
I wasn't going to take that angle. I was probably going to take more of a Big East team. So I'm just thinking 2012, 2013 season. That was the year we lost to Creighton a couple times. So I was going to say Creighton and Seton Hall.
Kev. I'm sorry. I'm Kev. Procedurally. Come on, man. When's the last time they won the tournament? They haven't really won many tournaments in the Big East, right? Big East tournaments. And then, actually, I'm sorry. You're right. It wasn't actually a terrible guess. You're right, because unless you lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament, my bad. My bad. It really wasn't as bad as I thought. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you for justifying it as not terrible. I appreciate
well, you were a year ahead of yourself, I believe. The year they lost in North
13,
Carolina was
14.
the last year in the old Big East. And Bob is correct. Before losing to the North Carolina Tar Heels, they had lost to Louisville, who went on to win the national championship that year, which has now been vacated.
So wait, they haven't lost. They haven't lost
Trick
2 in
question.
a row. Yeah.
Trick question.
How about it?
Wow. So
What do you got?
I don't know.
What's the second one?
Yeah. Anybody out there want to help us out?
Yeah.
Fact check.
How about it? Good stuff.
Interesting.
Nice.
Wow, so my question was void.
No, I mean, not void, but that's a eureka moment right there.
Yeah.
They haven't actually
about
lost 2 games in a row. It's good stuff. Good
Bob,
stuff.
that was
So
a
who
terrible
knows if they
guess.
ever
I
have.
mean, how could you even think that? Louisville got all of their wins voided. How could you have possibly thought that?
That's a big touche there. I'm a big fan of that one. Big fan of that one. That's good stuff. Well, in addition to giving it right back to me there, you're certainly giving it to me in the pick'em. So we'll see where that comes in next week. Maybe we'll come up with some kind of challenge, but that'll end the regular season one, you're saying, right, Tom? And then maybe we'll come up with some tournament games and tournament fun.
I like it.
And I certainly thought this was a great show. Went way long, which is good because we had a lot of stuff to talk about. But I'll say it again, that high school basketball, if you're out there watching this show, give it a look. Find a way to get out to a game because it's really tremendous what's going on. You'll be very, very well surprised by the quality of basketball that's out there. And keep in mind some of the things we've chatted about in terms of the offensive and defensive concepts as Villanova goes into the final few weeks of the regular season. And let's see what type of adjustments they make against a really good rebounding team in Seton Hall and a team that will get inside and like to drive the basketball on them. If the threes don't start dropping and Seton Hall starts to muscle Villanova around a little bit, push comes to shove, what can they do? I think it'll be a really, really interesting game tomorrow. Certainly appreciate everybody being here with us tonight. It's been fun, and we will see you next time right here on the Villanova Basketball Report.